Hey everyone, welcome to the Beyond the X and O's podcast, where we discuss mindset and leadership within the world of sports. This podcast is hosted by myself, Dr. Cassidy, Preston. I'm a mental performance coach and founder of CP Mindset, and Chris DiPiero, who has spent the past 30 plus years in the game of hockey from the NHL on down, including where he coached me back in my junior days. Now we get to work together in the mental performance and leadership space. Today, we go in a new direction. I think it's our first ref, experience as at a reffing level. And so I'll let you introduce our guest. I know you've known Scott a lot longer than I have. Tell us about the guest today, Chris.
Yeah, today's guest, Scott Oakman. As you mentioned, longtime referee. I think he's refed over almost like 1,000 games at the major junior level and OHA level. I got to know him probably when I was coaching UCAS and at the junior A level. He was a ref, and then he, in the OHL as well. When I coached in the Ontario Hockey League, he was a long time OHL official, very good one at that. But what's interesting as well, his full-time job is the executive director of the Greater Toronto Hockey League, the GTHL, the world's largest minor hockey association or league. So he certainly has to bring a lot of that officiating expertise that he has on the ice to obviously run this kind of juggernaut of the GTHL. And that was a great discussion. Scott is well-spoken man, and one of the things I think that I've always appreciated about Scott, as an official, as a coach to official relationship, but is his communication skills and his ability and willingness to listen, but also, stand firm, and certainly in his decision making. So he's kind of seen, the GTHL through, the lens of obviously having to oversee everything. And, he's led, equity, diversity, inclusion initiatives in the GTHL, which I think is a big thing. And, for him, and as we, move into a new era of hockey, he's a lot of safety measures and protocols that he's brought in for player well-being, right? And the safety of players, which I think has been a big thing for him. How about yourself? What did you take away?
Yeah, I think there's like two kind of camps and insights for me. One, first, go with the GTHL, which is often, hot topic within the Toronto GTA area about, the way of the GTHL. But I think it was really nice to get to see under the hood and what's going on at that executive level and the leadership level within that. And I thought he was able to bring up some important points, and he is looking to do things differently. And there's some other things behind the scenes going on. So I thought that was kind of very insightful. And then the flip side too, like I alluded to at the beginning, I think the whole referee standpoint and lens as well is such an important one that we did talk about. And it's so important in our game because a lot of refs, and especially in the minor hockey, even junior level, it's not an easy job. There is no winning as a ref. You do a great job as a ref, there's probably still half the people at the game don't like you. And so the mental fortitude of that, and some of the evolution that's happened in reffing. And so there's a lot to take out of this. But I do encourage and want to encourage off the bat, just a reminder for everyone and parents and players and coaches to respect officials, because it is tough. And I know we talked about before off camera, I think in the States, they're starting to do green whistles for coach or for refs 18 and under, which I think is so important. So I'm going to leave it at that from my end. I want the listeners just to dive in, but any final thoughts from your side, Chris?
Yeah, I just think the listeners are going to enjoy Scott. Again, he talks about the officiating stuff, but I think more importantly, his role as the executive director of this, the greatest, the largest minor hockey league in the world. And I think it's the initiatives and the ideas of why kids play sport. I think he brings up, that notion, and it was a big thing. And I think that's keeping that in mind for all the constituents, parents, coaches, and the players themselves have to understand that at all levels, at all levels of the game. And, I think that's important. And I think that comes up in the discussion. It was a really, really insightful discussion. So I think our listeners will enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a different take than some of the more common athlete and coach lenses that we've looked at. So I hope you listen to it. I hope the listeners enjoy. It's thought-provoking, challenges the status quo a bit, getting thinking differently about the game and going beyond the X's and O's. So As always, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and reach out with any questions, and enjoy this episode as we keep going beyond the X and O's.
Well, Scott, thank you for joining Cass and I here on the Beyond the X's and O's podcast. It's great to connect with you in this this forum, and I think to kind of how you and I got to know each other is when you were refereeing in the OHA when I was coaching the St. Michael's Buzzers, and Cass would have been one of the players that I would have been coaching, and you would have been reffing. I'm sure you ref Cass as well as he went on to the Ontario Hockey League, and then you and I got to get reacquainted in the Ontario Hockey League with your refereeing and that sphere. And as the listeners kind of know, you're the executive director and chief operating officer of the the world's largest hockey league in the world. So it's pretty impressive in terms of the scope of within the game of the roles that you play. First off, before we get to that point, can you just maybe share with the listeners? We have coaches, we have athletes, we have parents that that are listening. Can you share with them, a little bit about your backstory, your history, and how you got to be a referee, and then B, in the current role that you have?
Yeah, sure. It's first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have the discussion today, and I always do my best to take away as much as I contribute to these conversations. So I look forward to hearing from both of you. And it's, Chris, you're one of the guys who I have the fondest memories of, and from just being a good human being, but also, some coaching referee moments, and so I got involved actually at first as an official, simply my dad refereed for I don't know, probably 40 or 50 years, amateur hockey, growing up in Scarborough. Some bizarre stories. He used to, back then, I guess referees used to use suitcases to carry their gear around. My dad's suitcase was always in the basement, opened up. And I used to actually, I can remember when I was as young as I can remember, I used to put his referee gear on in the basement. And we had this large room in the basement, and I would pretend I was refereeing hockey games in the basement. I'd drop the puck and blow the whistle. And so that's my earliest memories of even thinking about officiating. And when I turned 15, my dad went to an officiating program with me, and I started out refereeing in Scarborough and moved on to I actually joined the Ontario Minor Hockey Association first as a referee, and then I got involved in the Metro Junior Hockey League, which was operating kind of independent from everybody, and then joined the OHA and got an opportunity with the OHL, and I've got to meet some great people and work some amazing hockey, and be on the ice with some of the best athletes in the game, that many of whom moved on to play National Hockey League or play in CIS championships or Memorial Cups, and so it's been a tremendous experience. And I've got to, my whole social circle is around hockey, and it's all because of maybe those days refereeing pretend hockey games in my parents' basement.
You know what? I love that, because the game is such a special aspect of our lives, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention, you and I had a conversation. I can't remember when and where, but we started talking a little bit about the game, and it turned out one of your childhood best friends was a teammate of mine. I think it was Brett Warner. No, it's Brett Warner, and
Yep.
it was interesting because he's a chiropractor up here in Newmarket, Ontario, and I think he and I played together, but we didn't know obviously the connection to you. But you and I started having this discussion. So that to me is the beauty of the game. I find is that we can make these connections in different ways, and I think that's kind of obviously, as you say, you've been at this and from many different angles. From your perspective of those kinds of refereeing, and then obviously transitioning into your current your full-time job, where have you seen the game grow and develop and change, and what has been the biggest growth and change in your mind?
Yeah, I think that there's two sides of that. I think there's been tremendous positive change. I think right from the way the game is played these days, and how much safer it is from a physical aspect on and off or on the ice. there's a greater awareness of the long-term consequences to injuries, penalty changes and application of penalties, and penalty standards have been increased. You know, the fighting aspect of the game is certainly in minor hockey it's almost non-existent. In junior hockey it's almost non-existent. You know, the frequency of fights occurring in games, and even the overly aggressive physical style of play, it's just not there. It's come back to more of a pure sense of the beauty that the game can offer when it comes to skilled plays. So I think, you know, that aspect of it is you know, one of the greatest positive changes to the game. You know, I think we have challenges in terms of some things I'm sure we may get into here in terms of the overzealousness of you know, the competition side of the game, the financial challenges that face the game today that are going to be really significantly difficult to overcome. And I think sort of the priorities that are placed on why kids get involved in the game, and whether those priorities are where perhaps they should be in terms of the pure outcome of what participating in sport need to be. I think there's been a shift maybe in the wrong direction in that way. So I think with anything, we need to kind of come back to the center on that a little bit, and it probably will take some time to do that. But I think there's a recognition, which I think is the first step in correcting that those challenges need to be addressed, and in order for kids to really truly benefit from what the sport can offer.
I love that duality of your answer, Scott. And I think, you know, lots to prime into in your current role, and especially the challenges in minor hockey, and the GTHL is definitely in Toronto as a hub for, you know, overzealousness, the wrong reasons, and these things just inherent out of, you know, the love of the game, and the distraction, the professionalization of just, you know, sport in general, and hockey, and Canada's drive for hockey. But before we maybe even get into that, because there's probably lots of different unique things to unpack, I think the lens of a ref, I think, is such a important aspect that is important for a lot of people, often don't appreciate or look at. And so from being a referee, and I've had, like, you know, referees reach out to us and just managing their emotions and challenges, and know refs in the, you know, one of my friends actually ref in the NHL, and it's like, you know, the challenges that can happen in that, and for people to appreciate that. So what I would I'm getting to a question, but the question is just around, like, you know, one, like, a ref's job is to make the game fair. You can't play without a ref. Like, it's not really a fun game. And it's like, you know, they're needed. And then also in keeping it safe. And then also just like the perspective that you get from a referee on the game, and looking at that as your own experience as a ref. And then now as you know, in working in your current league in the GTHL, what's your take on the importance of that role, and any messages around that, and just the mindset for the referee, but also just parents and coaches and athletes to appreciate the importance of the role, and creating more win-win relationships? Because I find there's often a very contentious relationships there. And I know there's often a ref shortage, or you're not getting quality refs because they drop out, just like sometimes you're not getting quality minor hockey coaches because they'll drop out and they don't want to deal with the parents or whatever. So there's all kinds of different challenges in the game, and we don't often take the lens of the ref. So I just wanted a pretty open-ended question there, but I think it's one I don't want to overlook in this, because you have not just the ref background, but now the other side as well too. So
yeah, no, it's certainly an interesting perspective that I've had, and actually I think it's on both sides, having my professional role versus my hobby, as I call it, which you know, I'm off the ice now, but I'm working off the ice in a officiating manager role. I think it's actually helped me become better in both ways, and I think that's because I have a balance of both sides of it. And I think, really, to be honest with you, and often coaches and parents get blamed for the animosity that that might exist in the atmosphere of an arena. And a lot of that is earned, don't get me wrong, but I think there, from the officiating side of things, there also needs to be a greater understanding. One of the things I think that officials need to learn and understand as part of the complex development that they have as an official is the other side of the coin. So certainly ex-players who become officials, there's an eye-opening experience for them, but it also gives them a different lens than somebody who hasn't played a highly competitive level game. There's an understanding of the emotion that the players go through and perhaps coaches go through that they might not otherwise properly comprehend. Certainly at major junior level or junior A level, you have professional coaches, and their emotion is tied to not just bringing these young people along in life and in hockey, but also it's their profession, and there's certain expectations put upon them, and if they're not able to achieve them, it's their livelihood. So understanding those parameters when officials are in the place of dealing with disputes and conversations and addressing issues that might come up through a hockey game, just not excusing behavior, but understanding where that emotion may be coming from is really important. I think it actually allows you to address it in a more productive way. But at the same time, I think the shoe can be put on the other foot with parents and coaches that have just like a referee who hasn't walked in the shoes of a coach. If a coach hasn't skated in the skates of a referee, there's not a complete understanding of the speed the game things happen, angles, and viewing angles of certain plays and how you may or may not see them. We regularly point out, that even the best of the best referees in the world in the National Hockey League need video for plays at the net. They need video for the NHL player safety uses video for discipline. When you have two of the best referees in the world on the ice and two of the best linesmen on the ice, the game happens at such a speed that things are going to be seen differently than they may actually be in reality. And when we're dealing with somebody who may be a teacher by day, or a firefighter, or a police officer, or an accountant, or a construction worker, and then they're going out that night, they're going to have a different set of skills than they might expect from professional referees. And so if their expectation is what they're going to see in the NHL, their expectations aren't going to ever be met. And I think there needs to be a perspective in their eyes that they need to understand or have a realistic set of expectations for the officials that they're going to get in any particular game. So I think there needs to be a good understanding on both sides of that. And as I say, there's often a focus on pointing fingers at coaches and parents, and some of that's deserved, but the other side of it is, I think, part of the education of an official, part of the apprenticeship they go through, needs to be a greater emphasis on the pressures and perspectives of the players playing the game and the coaches that are coaching it. But much like without a referee, we won't have a hockey game. Well, without players on both teams, we wouldn't have a hockey game either. So all parties are important in that perspective.
I love that. And I want to just even share, I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, around I reffed for a little bit while I was at York University still playing. I was like, oh, I'm going to ref intramurals, like just intramural. I was like, this is hard. I was like, do I make the call? Do I not make the call? I was like, I'll move. Like, it was not easy. And like, I was, a university level player. Like these guys were not fast, good quality. I was like, feel the pressure of a ref too. Like, would you make the call or not? And so I can remember that. And I think definitely and you see it, like the players that have played, they'll rise the ranks quickly if you play at a high level and then start reffing and you like doing it, because they're recruiting. They want that at the NHL and those higher levels. They are recruiting them up. So I do like the idea of every coach should be a ref for a couple games. It should just be, just to experience what it's like, and vice versa. Cause obviously being a coach, it's the pressures of that, which then probably leads into a whole good discussion around just the state of minor hockey. And I've got a lot of challenges with the overzealousness, the over focus on the results. I got parents, kids, and coaches taking 13-year-old AAA hockey like it's the Stanley Cup Finals, and it's like, what are we doing here? So like, and I'm sure you see lots of that. Um, and that's just the current culture. And there's no easy solutions, but, and so I don't know if you want to touch on that, at all from your perspective as well, just on a high level. And then I'll throw it to Chris just around, like you said, like that's been building up. And has there been any things that stick out? Is it there's just more money involved, you think? Is it more the Instagram, the social media, the pressures, the context there, the glorification of it, like you think of like the best player back in the 90s and 80s, like they're making good, but now they're like superstar celebrities, and like in a way, like it's definitely changing. So therefore the pursuit of it becomes even a bigger chase. Anything stand out, and then we can maybe dive into other nitty gritty stuff. But I think that's an interesting tangent on this, like the crux of what all the pressure is. It's like, well, why is there so much pressure on a 13-year-old and the coach of a 13-year-old? And obviously at the higher levels, that's different, like the junior ones, etc. But even just in the more minor hockey sense, any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I want to start by saying I don't think any parent intentionally does something. I think they all have the best interests of what they think is right for their kids. And I have friends who, and it actually was interesting where there was a whole window of like 7 or 8 years where I had a whole bunch of people that I'd gone to school with or had relationships with whose kids were in, competitive hockey. And so it was interesting to see how they got drawn into like the most reasonable, logical people you could meet. But once they got into the environment of the not wanting their kids or their child to be left behind by, not skating or playing hockey all summer, at 9 or 10 years old, they were adamant their kids were going to play lacrosse or golf or play another sport. But once they got into the environment, um, they got drawn in only because they felt like their kids were going to be left behind. And so I listen, I'm a parent too, who my kids were not involved in sport, but I certainly understanding wanting the best for your kids and being empathetic for that. And I'm sure I made mistakes along the way as a parent as well. So I listen, I get that completely. And I really don't know if I don't know, there's certainly no silver bullet solution. I think obviously education is probably the biggest piece that, hockey, the GTHL, for instance, doesn't own the game of hockey in Toronto. They're in the GTA. Hockey Canada doesn't own hockey in Canada. I think it's, we own what we oversee, but there's lots of influences externally from our programming. I think what we really need to focus on is continuing to massage what our values and beliefs are and making sure our programming reflects that, and understanding we may lose people to outside the system to programs that have different values and beliefs, but that's sometimes the consequences of doing the right thing. And so it is a challenging business decision, even when it comes to, knowing that, you might lose several hundred kids to another program that might have different philosophies that the parents in their mind think it's the right way for their kids to become the best that they can be. But if it's not aligned with your values, then, you shake their hand and wish them luck. So I think we really need to continue getting our organizations in the mindset that we need to become more values based than we are, and head in that direction, and understand that, I think the short-term impact of that might be some kids moving on to other programming, but I think the long-term benefits for the kids that stay in the programming, as well as the growth of the game, that certainly the diversity that's existing in Toronto will continue to grow, would demonstrate that the opportunity to grow the game is in the 93% that aren't currently playing, and they're going to be drawn more to the value-based programming. I think that we're probably collectively going to share as what it should be here. And so there is actually an argument to be made that although there will be losses in terms of a certain contingent of players, the opportunity with the kids who aren't playing the game, they're likely to be more attracted to a values-based program than not. So I think that's the other side of it. And we just need to, continue to work through identifying what those values are. And, I think where our Hockey Canada has done a really good job in terms of their introduction to hockey and their pathway program. And there's still a big learning curve in getting people aligned with that. But if we can continue on the path with that, I think we're headed in the right direction.
What I like about what you're talking there, Scott, it's funny because everybody thinks the GTHL and they automatically, most people that I speak to, they automatically go to the AAA level, and you're responsible for the GTHL, the whole GTHL. So when you talk about pathways to the game, and then kind of looking at the 93% that aren't playing hockey, or where they're at, like that's where the growth of the game should be looking towards, and then identifying values to kind of grow and connect with, which is great, because the game, as we've articulated already, that it has a lot of great benefits, as sport, and the inherent strengths that sport provides young girls, young boys, in terms of being able to be participate. With that being said, clearly that's a large challenge. How do you go about bringing that down to like manageable kind of not so much projects, but how do you get that to be able to be tangible in the moment? Is it like a year? Do you look at what we can do this year? Is it a 3-year kind of phase in programs of certain things, or is it 3 to 5 years? How does that, an organization like the GTHL, go about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a long-term approach. I don't know if I could put, whether it's 3, 5 years. I think we're going to find out soon with kids who have gone through, we're probably 4 or 5 years away from kids who started the pathway getting to the end of the program. So we're going to be able to look at retention rates. We're going to be able to look at skill development, and actually the programs that have been operating outside the system with the traditional old model. It'll be interesting actually to be able to look at kids that participated in that programming versus that kids that stayed in the programming, and compare, the length of time they stayed in hockey, how, with their skill develop, the physical skill development was like, those types of things. So I think there's a multi-pronged kind of strategy here. Obviously, there's the front-facing programming change that's happened, and we're still trying to refine that and get to the right, with minor adjustments year to year to get to the right balance. But there's also lots of other work going on in terms of strategic approaches around education, and even recognizing, the cost of the game isn't just it's an issue of equity too. I mean, if you go to, it's no secret, if you go to any arena where there's AAA programming happening and look at the parking lot, and then go to a lower competitive level of the game and look at the parking lot, you're going to see a very different type of vehicle generally parked in the parking lot. Well, to me, that's an indicator that not the best players are playing the highest level hockey. The best players, some of the best players. I was at a clinic once, and somebody made a great point that the best hockey player may never have played the game of hockey because they never got the chance or opportunity. They chose another sport, and we'll never know. But there are many examples where kids just financially, or their families couldn't financially make it to play the highest level hockey, and so cost is a barrier to them being able to do that, and we need to find ways around that, and are trying to come up with some strategies. So I think we do have some strategies around equity and diversity, which certainly the equity piece, finances is a big part of that, and trying to find ways of making sure not just being able to afford the playing on a AAA hockey team, but also as kids progress to older age groups, when off-ice training and off-season training becomes more important as kids get older to be a high-performance hockey player, having financial opportunities for kids to be able to access that programming so that they can maintain their skills and continue to be a high-performing player when they get to that proper age. So there's some of the challenges that we have ahead of us, and I think we need to play a larger role in creating or providing opportunities for families that have those types of challenges, so that their child isn't left out from being the greatest hockey player ever just because they didn't have the financial resources to make that happen. So there continues to be strategies. We continue to review them. We're working with more partners now than we ever have. We're trying to align with partners that are like-minded to address these issues. And there's no question there's a shift in even the corporate sponsorship world that this is a greater priority than it's ever been. And which is another reason for us, if the ethical reasons aren't enough, the business reasons are easily there for us and our organizations to move in the direction of having values-based programming that includes, equitable access to skill development, both hockey skills and personal development, in order to be the best they can be after they come out of the game of hockey.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in because I find it very interesting. It's such a challenge. Like you oversee so much, and there's there's the money side, there's the strategic approaches, education side, which is like different ways to go with that, dealing with what's just the structure and the developmental pathways. And one of the things, because I think I get it mostly, but I probably don't even know all of the new changes. I'd be curious just to just unpack just slightly what some of the new pathway models is. That more cross ice games, some at those younger ages, grassroots, and at what ages is that happening? What are some of the main changes that have happened in the last 5-10 years around the pathways? Because I'm fairly aware, but I'm probably not fully aware. And because I mostly work with older athletes now too. So, but I'm sure some of the listeners would be curious to know as well. So if you don't mind unpacking that'd be much appreciated.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, and I don't want to take up. So I'll give you the Cole's Notes version, but certainly the introduction of the game has changed in the last 4 or 5 years. That the kids are learning to play the game on modified ice surfaces now. Up to a certain age, it's cross ice, then it moves to half ice, then expands to an introduction to full ice programming. The season structure has changed. There's a development phase at the start of the season, so it's no more coming back after Labor Day weekend and we're right into regular season play. That there's a period of time where there's individual and team skill development, and that's happening at kind of all ages now. So once you leave the modified ice surface, now you're into a seasonal structure change. The priority on individual skill development is higher at younger age groups. Then obviously you get into team skills and team tactics in older age groups. Chris is probably way better to speak to some of this stuff than I am. Coaching is not my area of expertise. I'll be straight up on that. But from a high level, that's the seasonal structure is changed. Making sure teams are playing as late into the hockey season as possible. So modifying playoff structure so that you're not playing 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 7 game series, and you have teams that at the competitive level that are finished in January or beginning of February, that all teams now play meaningful hockey until March 1st with a modified tournament style playoff structure. And so there's a bunch of those types of modifications that have happened, obviously with a goal of extending the hockey experience and allowing or trying to level the playing field in terms of, kids specifically at the younger age group, that they're not weeded out of competitive just because, for instance, a child might start hockey programming later or might not be as on the same growth path as physically as other players, that they're not deprived opportunities, that there's a better balance of opportunities for kids at the younger age group. So there's been a bunch of those types of changes as well. And again, there's a pathway that's modeled, but it has been revisited every year with the tweaks necessary. And I think that that's going to continue to go forward. But there is a much greater acceptance of it now than there was when it was initially implemented. And we're actually finding, certainly at the entry level program, are organizations who many were resistant and that might be an understatement when I say resistant to the modification, that they've embraced it fully. They're even doing individual studies and data collection on things like touch pucks or puck touches in the modified ice versus full ice, so that they can actually demonstrate that even kids who aren't as skilled as the best player on the ice are having access to touching the puck more than they would have on a full ice environment. And and quite frankly, the parental feedback has been it's been overwhelmingly positive. Like there's always a resistance to, specifically parents who may have grown up playing the game, when they see their child playing in a modified way, that it isn't what the way they learned or the way they played. But many of them, or most of them, are finding it once their child experiences, their children are having a much more enjoyable experience, which clearly fun is the largest retention factor in kids wanting to return to the game. And kids are having much higher or much more fun playing that modified version than they were in the old model.
I want to jump in. It's funny you say, because it's like that. The one thing that, so Cass and I do a lot of work with coaches, and we do a lot of work with athletes, and one of the things that we try to always talk about, especially on the coaching side, is just because you as a coach, maybe you were coached a certain way, that's how you need to coach now. It's like we're trying to get people to think progressively. So when you just mentioned there about parents being, that might have played the game, and they're looking at modified ice being, kind of, the opposite of what they think is the best way to develop. It's an interesting way to go about things. With that, like I want to be able to understand too, or at least see if we can paint a picture of, we talk about values-based, kind of decision making and all these different aspects. Are there other ways in which the game can kind of grow? And where I'm going to go with this, Scott, is that, like, in Canada, I know it's such a large country, but I find regional kind of components to the way the game is played. So, i.e., maybe Western Canada, there seems to be a lot more prevalence with academy-based, or winter club kind of opportunities in BC that are playing at the AAA level. So they're creating these programs that would normally we in Ontario would look at as being AAA. As an example, do you ever see any meshing of that happening? Do you foresee that? Or is it still kind of more just leave it at that, it's regional? And so I'm just trying to get a gauge of, from a developmental perspective. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but just trying to get a handle on why in one part of the country it's this way, but in another part of the country it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, that's a great question. I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure I have an answer to that. I know that the academy model is, there is a national process to become part of the Hockey Canada family with that model, and that obviously started because of the prevalence of it in Western Canada. It hasn't been embraced in Ontario like it has been in Western Canada. I'm not really sure why that is. It could be just because of the advanced development. Although I don't know much about Western Canada, so I don't want to make this sound like it's a criticism. I just don't know the landscape out there. But it could be just because the historic nature of the high performance level programming in Ontario, that there may not be viewed as a need for it. I think there's some, I'm a proponent that the more choice that we can offer in our system, the better when it comes to that type of programming. And there is certainly a great number of positive attributes to an academic type program and combining that with athleticism and sport. And so for some families, that's the right approach to things and the desirable way. And I think we as an entity should be making options like that available to families who want to be part of the system, but want that option available to them. But in terms of the growth, I do know the ones that are currently in the system, they've experienced some growth themselves. But in terms of the number of schools, and the other reason of that is there's obviously, a very well developed school system hockey program that's been in existence and you'd be familiar with it, that's been in existence for a very long time, that has a great reputation. and whether or not there's a need on their part to be part of the system when they've been able to exist successfully outside the system, outside the Hockey Canada system. Maybe there's just no need for that to be integrated. But I mean, the value of our area is that there's lots of choice for families, whether they're in the system or out. There's lots of opportunities for them to find the right programming that meets the needs of their families. Maybe it could be one of those reasons why it hasn't taken off here. I'm not really sure. I do want to get back to the one other piece that you mentioned about growing the game, because I actually think that's part of the game that will grow naturally. Kids at that level are just they're playing hockey already. I think where hockey really needs to sorry, I keep saying hockey is hockey in general. I think where the traditional hockey system needs to rethink their approach. And what it has been is the way they offer programming. Like there are very few programs that offer anything different than when I was a kid. You know, you entry level, you show up Saturday for your game, Sunday's your practice, the rest, and you go from this fall to the spring. We have programs that are, you know, there's one example that I always use, and I won't name the organization, but they existed in an area in the Scarborough area that through the change in demographics in the area was a very large Chinese population became part of that community, and they didn't modify the program offering to meet the needs of that community and the other priorities that community had on their cultural activities. And because they were unwilling to modify their program offerings, they actually ended up no longer existing. And so I think hockey people need to understand that there needs to be a greater priority of understanding the community that they're serving. And whether that is changing the dates the program's offering, whether it means offering different windows of programming, maybe programming is only offered half a year or two segments of half a year versus one full season. There needs to be creativity to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the families in that community, so that the 93% who aren't in the game feel welcomed and we're meeting their needs. We're not expecting them to mold their lifestyles to the existing programming.
Yeah. No, I really appreciated getting your perspective, Scott. And I know I want to be mindful of time. So, you know, some of my last thoughts, questions are just, you know, wrapping around one, like if you have any high arching, you know, mindset, leadership, you know, dealing with the unique structure of the game right now and parents and athletes navigating. If there's any comments there, as well as just like, you know, the future of the GTHL and some of the other things that maybe you haven't touched on yet that you think are important, that you're navigating through or overcoming or developing, that you think are worth sharing. I just want to kind of an open-ended question as we try to be mindful of your time and start wrapping up.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I could do one shout out back to sort of what my hobby is versus my professional life. Certainly, if you have former players that watch the podcast, and if they want first of all a hobby / potential career opportunity, officiating is an excellent opportunity right now. Moving through junior hockey to professional ranks. I know, Cassidy, you said that you have a friend that's in the National Hockey League. I'm willing to bet he was probably a former player. That is like the fast track now. But aside from that, even if that isn't either your desired landing spot or it is your desired landing spot, you don't get there. The opportunities in officiating right now have never been greater. And I'll say personally, as much as my formal education has taught me about life, I can tell you officiating has helped me in so many different ways in my professional life, from communication to crisis management to dealing with emotion, dealing with my personal emotion, all of those things I think have helped me become who I am in my profession and in my personal life, actually. So plug out there for those who might even have never thought of it. I say that's something that it would be worth considering. In terms of the challenges we're facing, certainly the financial thing we've talked about, and there are some real challenges we have right now with reports around immoral behavior or unethical behavior that we're trying to address right now. it is a challenge. And you know, and speaking to some of my colleagues across other sport, although hockey's been in the spotlight for some of these, I think it's something that's becoming a challenge in all sport in general, where there's influence that's being exercised upon organizations or individual coaches that is putting priorities in the wrong places. So, you know, we have that challenge ahead of us, but I'm confident that if we're going to continue to address these in the right way and hopefully come up with systems and processes that limit the opportunity for people to take advantage of the situation. So I think the more we talk about it openly, the more we bring light to it, and the more we try to be transparent about it is the best way for us to try and get to the bottom and resolving the problems.
I got one last question for you. Based on, you know, you talk about value-based kind of decisions. You know, one of the values I think that, you know, in any sport, regardless of just hockey, is the word respect. And what for the players that are listening and for the coaches that are listening, from the referee, Scott Oakman, and you know, that hobby-based Scott Oakman, what would be kind of a way in which players can, you know, that you can convey to players and convey to coaches how they can respect officials in a better manner?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is just, I think the biggest one is the human error and human impact on the game exists, not only player on player, but also officials are the same. So when you're dealing with an official, remember that they're a human being too. They don't want to. They don't want to come away with any controversy from a game based on a bad decision that they've made, and communicating person to person as human beings. And so, you know, I was never concerned about profane language at a high performance level hockey. It was when that profane language was directed at me as opposed to being used in conversation, for instance. That's an example. So just be mindful of the communication piece of it, and take the time to you know, get to know the officials. Even I was always a guy who tried to talk to players at opportunities to get to know them a little bit. There were players and goaltenders who didn't want any part of it. You respect their decision, but you make the try. And so getting to know the officials, some of my favorite players of all time would be viewed by fans as probably the most difficult to deal with. And that was because of the style of play that they had, but they were always the best players to deal with because they understood that they had a role to play in the game, and they understood you had a role to play. And our job as officials isn't to necessarily prevent you from the outcome that you want, but it's there, as Chris, you alluded to earlier, which was a perfect phraseology, was make it safe for all the players to play and make it fair for both teams. And all officials, there is an official in the world that goes out trying not to do one of those two things. And sometimes the game goes sideways and it doesn't go the way you want, but it's through human error. It's not through intention that happens.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I can say from my perspective as a former coach, you know, at the junior A level and at the OHL level, I thought you always operated with the utmost integrity as an official, and you always were able to communicate both to players and to coaches like myself in a fair and concise manner. And I always thought that was it was a great way to handle things. And I think as a coach, I always respected that. So thank you for that. And
I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you, Chris. Thank you.
appreciate that. And so thank you. Yeah, appreciate you taking the time today to spend with us and talk a little bit about the game. It sounds like we could probably go on forever, you know, and go longer. And we might have to get you on for round two at some point just to kind of continue the dialogue as the game progresses. So again, thanks, Scott. And certainly, you know, I know as we record, it's the end of the summer, so the hockey season is coming upon us, and should be another exciting year in the Greater Toronto Hockey League. So thanks again.
Thanks, Chris. And just I'd love to come back for round two, as long as that's not you standing over me like the picture behind you at the end of that round two.
Along with LE picture, right? That's
not the physical.
Yeah,
I love it. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you, guys.